comments. I guess what I feel like is if they're chewing up the credibility of everyone who can hope to talk to the public. I mean, let me just say this. This is against the backdrop of COVID, where some of us had to say, I'm not so sure that we should be going to see Chinese New Year celebrations. I'm not sure we should be running the LA Marathon. I'm not sure that masks only magically work for people who work in hospitals and the rest of us shouldn't wear them. Oh, no, no, we have to wear them. 2 weeks to flatten the curve made no sense. What you're seeing is almost like a constant attack on the credibility of scientists with these childlike official narratives and a bunch of smart people who are held hostage to them because in order to challenge them results in censorship and expulsion. And just check out the comments, the number of negative things that you see scrolling by. So what you're seeing is you're seeing the degradation of your scientific class forced to deal with inadequate information, spending their time in things that are completely inefficient because of the presence of centralized narratives, which are then given the sort of blessings of the institutions. And so what's ultimately going to happen here is that we're not going to believe almost anybody if we keep chewing through this the way we're doing. I'm worried about what happens when you can't go to Sam Harris for sobriety or Michael Shermer for sobriety. Like, I'm willing to swing at a bunch of pitches in part because I came from a family that went through the McCarthy era, and we found out, hey, all those conspiracies, a lot of them were really true because they were targeted on you and your
Yeah.
family, right? And so my Bayesian priors have to do with the fact that a spy was sent against my own family. And when people say, oh, well, that's conspiracy talk. Well, if we had known that there was a spy sent against our own family, we wouldn't have had our names read on national television and turned into pariahs now, would we? So, in part, I'm going to take the prerogative of saying, having been betrayed by my government, which I still love and support, but I also know that they actually do conspire. Right now, the biggest danger we have is the degradation of trust in authoritative voices, because if to sit inside of the institutions means to depend on a paycheck that is subordinate to a narrative. To sit outside is to risk becoming a crank, talking to the public. The question is, why are these people having these conversations? Why are grown people talking about little green men? And I have to tell you, I came off a 3,000 person call on Twitter Spaces because my brother just got the second strike as an evolutionary theorist, talking about whether or not ivermectin might be effective against COVID, and that whether or not novel mRNA vaccines might result in free-floating spike proteins that would have a degradation at the level of histology and cytology. And the idea that Susan Wojcicki, whoever the hell she is, has the right to shut down biologists and even potentially the originator of the mRNA vaccine technology, or one of the innovators. We have right now, Brian, what we have to do is we scientists have to stop being employees. And we have to have our professors remember that they're not meant to be the employees of the universities. They are the fucking owners. And to subject people to implicit bias testing, which doesn't make any sense, or to have somebody who can compute the anomalous magnetic moment of the electron subjected to critical race theory to get them to be more racist as a compulsory part of employment, is a degradation of the condition of American citizenship. And it is getting to the point where I'm ready to pick up a torch and a pitchfork and march on the chancellors of the UC system and other fine universities and say, over my fucking dead body, give us our data, give us our dignity, get the hell out of our labs, get out of our classrooms. Pretty pleased with sugar on top. We've created the prosperity of the country, and it is now time for you to remember that you don't have administrative rights over me. And if Susan Wojcicki starts to throw Brett Weinstein off of YouTube, and if we get thrown off because we're having a UFO conversation, I'm going to have to ask whether our society has been hijacked by a geopolitical strategic rival, because this is incredibly dangerous. You don't chew through the credibility of your public spirited, smart people who are technically capable of of separating fact from fiction when given proper data and autonomy, and subject them to being, supervised as if they're toddlers in a nursery.
But then, Eric, can't they say to you, you don't like it? You make your own platform.
Are you kidding me? I mean,
Uh,
I've been through. Look, I don't mean to be. There's a point at which you have to appreciate that the more I reiterate the same simplistic points, that these are communications utilities. And I have an old joke as a Democrat: should Republicans be allowed to use the roads? Um, 'Cause Lord knows they could get up to something conservative. They might actually meet, and they might have unfettered conversations behind closed doors. So at some point, when you're having a conversation about should Republicans be able to use the roads to meet in an unfettered context, having conversations and plan political action, um, you have to recognize that is not a natural conversation. That is an insane conversation. And I say that as a Democrat and maybe even a progressive Democrat. What we're talking about, all of us have enough years on us that we remember a very different world. Whatever this thing is, as I say, everyone can prove to themselves by doing any research that peer review is not naturally a part of science. There is nothing that I am held up as a crank for more than reminding people of this truth. Anyone who speaks a particular truth becomes a crank in the eyes of the narrative. This idea of calling Vichy France France is intrinsically offensive to a Frenchman sheltering in England, plotting and caucusing with the English as to how to retake the nation of France. Right now, what we need to do is we need to retake the nation of science. We need to take our own universities back. And, nobody believes in this stuff who's smart. We just all sit around cowering like spineless invertebrates every time somebody threatens to call us a name. And what I'm trying to say is, Brian, you remember how to do physics. You remember how to do science. You remember how to communicate it. But what we don't do is we don't stand up and say what Jordan Peterson said or Brett Weinstein said or I say. We have to effectively say, no mas, you can fire me. And as Einstein said so brilliantly and clearly, it is the obligation of the public intellectual to face financial ruin and prison. And if we are not willing to face financial ruin and prison to defend our values, which provide the prosperity and security under which everyone else shelters, then we deserve to learn Mandarin in our schools in preparation for our future.